Thank you. All right. Welcome back after lunch, everyone. Shortly after 1 p.m. on January 7th, House Government Operations and Military Affairs. We have a couple of friends from the Department of Public Safety here, and we're just going to have a early session conversation with them about introduction and priorities. And we will be talking to Commissioner Morrison and also the new Director of Animal Welfare, Lisa Violet. Thank you. All right. Yeah, feel free to. The table on the end there, Rep Hoover's not with us today, so that's perfect for if you want to do a duet.
Oh, she's the star.
Yes.
I'll just sit off to the side here a little.
Oh.
You want to harmonize with me? Yes, I'll take it.
What would you like to start with?
Good morning. Thank you for the record. My name is Jennifer Morrison. I'm the Commissioner of Public Safety, and the Division of Animal Welfare is one of the 8 divisions of the Department of Public Safety. And I'm excited to introduce you to Director Lisa Mylott. She's going to give you a little overview of who she is, how she came to us, and some highlights of the report that is in its final phases of coming your way. That's pretty much it. We're available for questions. And of course, as you know, all the work she's doing is laid out by statute. And we are threading a needle between the requirements of the statute and the realities of a very, very lean fiscal year and competing priorities in the areas, of course, as you know, of housing and education and public safety and many other competing priorities. So with that sort of framing, I'll turn it over to Lisa.
Thank you. And thank you very much for having me here today. I've been excited to get started on this part of my job, and so it's nice to be here. I'm Lisa Mylott, and I've hired as the Director of the Division of Public Safety. I started work in mid-May, which is a bit later, I know, than might have been anticipated, but I was a law professor before coming here, and I could not move until after the end of the semester. So I practiced law. I'm a lawyer. I practiced law in the DC area initially, which is where I got involved in animal issues. And then I moved to the University of Georgia to teach in 2007, where I started working on the local government shelter side of things. Georgia has municipal shelters that are funded by local taxpayers. And so I started working to make reforms on that end of things. And I switched my teaching focus in 2018 to focus on animal welfare. I started a law school clinic where my students and I worked with jurisdictions around Georgia on animal welfare. And I worked on, in that respect, I was working on practices and programs to a large extent to improve things for both the most vulnerable people and their pets, as well as on ordinances. But then I also worked on state legislation concerning animal issues. So that's my background in coming here. I wasn't looking for a new job, but I have to say, when I read the job posting, it seemed to describe both what I'd been doing and what I'm interested in doing, and it's Vermont. I grew up in Pennsylvania, and my mother's family's from Maine, so I have strong ties to the Northeast, and it's nice to be back up in this area. So that's my background and how I got here. Since I've been here, I've been meeting with a lot of stakeholders. I've been meeting with various folks in the government who currently have hands in the animal welfare world. So I've met with folks from the Agency of Agriculture. I've met with folks from Division of Fish and Wildlife, Department of Fish and Wildlife, I'm sorry. I've met with some folks from VSP, just the folks who are out there and currently working on these matters to find out, I want their ideas. No matter what I've done before, I think there's a lot to be said for the way the things that are currently working, and trying to figure out how to make those better instead of coming in and looking at a revolution. I'm pretty big of an incrementalist. I don't think that most real change on the government level happens through completely overhauling things in one day. I think that you make changes, you see how things play out, and then you respond to those and make further changes to see what still needs to be improved. As Commissioner Morrison said, I have a draft at this point of the comprehensive plan that is due to you all in the very near future, and I'm working on tweaking it and finalizing that. I hope to have it to you at some point next week. So that will be gripping reading for all of you, because as a law professor, I don't do things very briefly. So, you get history, you get citations, you get research. So just know that that's what will be coming your way. But I've actually really enjoyed getting to do all of this. I know there are a lot of people who worked very hard, including all of you all, to have this division created and to get to this moment where there's somebody who is sitting in front of you. And so I very much appreciate all of that. And I would like to say, I think Vermont has a real chance to be a leader in this area. The fact that the division is being is a new thing. And so it's, you know, we're talking about what are best practices. Okay, how can we get there in a way that is fiscally responsible as well as responsible in having it be somewhat organic based on what currently is in Vermont. I'm going to be open to a lot of questions, but the priorities I've been focused on are where are there marginal gains to propose to you all and your colleagues, where there could be cost savings, there could be process savings, things that are not going to cost money, are not going to take more judicial time, for example. Where can we do a little bit more with the same resources we have, or by reducing the burden on the current resources, as well as where are there inefficiencies to work on getting out of the system. And so the report I'm giving you explains a lot of concepts, but it is effectively a menu. And like any menu, there are a number of options that you can choose between. Menu items have costs, but I've also given you I'm also planning to give you a menu of ideas that are not raising taxes, new fees, anything like that. It's how do we do more with what we currently have? And just as an example, to give you an example, Representative Krasnow and Senator Williams have both submitted bills this week in the animal welfare realm that are addressing one of the issues where I think there's a huge inefficiency, and it's something that other people in the state obviously are talking about. I know it's been brought up a number of times when I've been meeting with people, but how do we deal with when animals are seized? They have to be held for an extended period of time. And there are costs to that holding. There's financial costs, there's space costs, there's opportunity costs, and there are costs to the animal. So how can that be more efficient? And I know both Representative Krasnow and Senator Williams have ideas for how to fix that. And so I'm really excited that these things are coming up and we can talk about implications of any of the approaches. Not today. I've not read their bills in detail, but just as an idea of the sorts of things I'm also hoping to identify is things like that, where, yeah, there's a process already. And so what can we do to just make this a little bit easier on everyone?
And more coordinated across the state, so that there's not so much disparity in how cases are treated across the state. So that's something that we're focusing on as well, is to, you know, examine minimum standard sounds very rigid. That's not really what I mean, but you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I got you.
We can get to some baseline so that the way you report an animal abuse case is standardized across the state, that people aren't shuffled to two different town clerks and then to an animal control officer who then says, call the police, who says call the state police, who says call Fish and Wildlife. Like,
I had that occur actually one time with,
Right.
I own restaurants and whatnot. One of my employees, by the way, totally respect the menu. Good call. But one of my employees had a small farm that he did produce food for sale. Chickens. There was, an issue with a wild cat. He trapped it in a have-a-heart trap, but it was a little too, just the proximity, it was kind of rough. But as we were calling around to figure out what to do with it, we were in this infinity loop of calls somebody else's. So, and this was 12 years ago, this conversation, I just wanted to say that it's a lived experience.
yeah, I mean, we've heard that obviously in the past. There are some communities, as you know, that have animal control officers or community service officers who have training in animal control issues, and others that absolutely do not. And it can be a very different experience as a caller trying to report what they feel is real abuse or neglect of an animal. So trying to build a connective tissue between the existing resources and now what could be a focal point with this position to at least standardize some of these things. And if nothing else, there's now potentially one-stop shopping of report to Lisa's office, she will get the person in the right direction, right? Like at least we can make some improvements, even if we didn't spend any more dollars than per position. Do you want your chair back, sir?
No, that's the other.
Oh, okay.
Chair.
Oh, that.
Yeah, so,
I'll take this bench.
yes, Representative.
My question is for you, Commissioner. When we created this position, there was a lot of debate about should it be in Fish and Wildlife? Should it be in Public Safety? Have you seen any administrative burden thus far? I know you've been part of the hiring process and that takes time, but has it been manageable so far?
I would have to get my financial director to give me the numbers, but the short answer is the money that was appropriated is not sufficient to cover the expenses of the position. So we already know that that's a deficit. So I could come back to you at another time with actual numbers, but
I can actually provide that. It's about
see?
$30,000 a year short of what we did for between salary benefits and the hard equipment that I need for the job.
30K short of operating costs.
And that's based on our estimate. I mean, we don't,
Yeah.
she's doing some travel around the state and there's mileage reimbursement, which of course varies from year to year. What the next full year will bring, we're not sure, but yeah, I knew we were somewhere in that ballpark, but I didn't want to get too far out there.
No, that's fine. We at least have an ish to work from once we get to budget memos.
Yes, yes, thank you.
But I'm a delight to be there, so it.
It's worth it.
I can tell.
Listen, it is a delight. It's a value added to our team. Like when we were in the hiring process for Assistant General Counsel, which is a position that's now in background check. We're excited to bring another general counsel member on. She was part of the oral board team because why wouldn't you use the expertise of an in-house, very experienced attorney? And so she brings a lot more to the team than just expertise in animal welfare. So we really hit it out of the park on this one.
You said you travel the state. Have you been involved with the horse rescues down in the Dorset area? That's so sad.
I have. I actually went in June. I went out with Fish and Wildlife when they did the most recent seizure. It is sad. I
Constantly
know,
getting more and more horses.
and there are more horses still on the property.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know that they just had one of the civil forfeiture hearings for that June seizure, I think earlier this week. And so they're waiting for a decision about whether or not the horses are. Forfeited. It's hard because the current statute allows you to seize animals that there's probable cause to say that they're being cruelly treated, right? And so even when you know there's a huge issue with the overall place, you can't take them all. And there is a very real question. If you take 30 horses or whatever was taken in June, will there be capacity to care for the remaining ones so that they don't end up need to be taken?
Yeah. Well, the rescues in my town, Dorset.
They're wonderful. They are such a huge help. They just took 9 horses from a New York case as
Yeah.
well. They're passionate and they do a good job, which doesn't always go together.
Representative Waters-Evans.
Can you assess if the situation, like there has been a lot of stuff in the news, like last summer in particular, there were some pretty high profile animal cruelty cases and some other things. And do you have an assessment of like what the scale is for everything like that happens that's on the news? Is that an anomaly? Is it something that's really regular that, just from what you've seen in your travels and the people you've spoken to, like?
I can give you some sense of at least the reported cases. So I went through the Valcor database, which is where law enforcement, the state, actually, I guess almost all of the law enforcement entities in Vermont enter their cases. I looked at all the cases that came in through VSP and through Fish and Wildlife that were animal incidents. They're not necessarily coded as cruelty versus something else because a lot of times you aren't sure. And the person who's talking is not sure when they call it in. What they know is they heard yelping, right? They heard a thud, they heard yelping. Who knows what? It's innocent explanations, there's not innocent. And so between VSP and Fish and Wildlife, there were about 400 animal incident calls in 2024. That's all, that includes running at large. That includes animals hit by vehicles. It includes all of the things that were coded as animal incidents. What it doesn't include is what was called into municipal police forces, into sheriff's departments. VSP records all the calls they get. So all of theirs show up. Fish and Wildlife, if they get a call directly, they report it if they open a case. If they call the person back and they can't reach the person, or they don't think that there's something to investigate, that doesn't show up in the record. So those 400 animal cases are what show up in the record for VSP and Fish and Wildlife. Of those, I believe it was about 200 of those cases were what I coded as potential cruelty. Again, doesn't mean they were all cruelty. It means that looking at it, this could be cruelty, it might not be. Dog in a car in August, right? I would code that as potential cruelty. Dog in a car in November, I'm not coding as potential cruelty. And so it can be a little bit variable as far as where these things fall, but there were about 200 cases. But there were only about, I think, 7 or 8 cruelty cases charged total. There's other cases that disappear. So for example, if there is a dog tethered out, underweight, right? No water. And somebody goes out and says, you need to feed your dog and you need to give it water, and they believe the person will legitimately comply. That case doesn't get reassessed unless there's a new call. And so cases, for example, where the animals aren't necessarily visible to bystanders, they might be inside an enclosure, they might be in a rural area, don't necessarily get those recalls. So we don't know, just because a case doesn't proceed to cruelty, we don't know what that means. So in answer to the question, I don't know. I know that there were about 200 potential cruelty that came in through VSP and Fish and Wildlife. I have the exact numbers in the report, so you will be able to see those, but to give you an idea of the scale, a lot of them involved 1 or 2 animals. What you see in the news is usually the more sensational ones, right? It's going to be the 30-horse seizure. It's going to be the blunt force trauma case. A lot of them are a lot more mundane. And one of the things I've realized in my years of doing this, I came into dealing with animal cruelty where I wanted to prosecute everyone. So 10 years ago, I was on the let's hardline rule, let's prosecute everyone, right? And after spending a lot of time working with members of the community in Georgia that I was in and working with people on these cases, an awful lot of it is preventable neglect that becomes cruelty, but it's not the blunt force trauma. It's not the large scale problems. It's mundane things where somebody, for example, there's not SNAP funding for a month, let's say. So somebody who used to share their food with their dog, they would buy human food and they would just undereat for themselves, no longer has that ability to feed their dog. And that becomes a potential cruelty case. I'm a big believer in figuring out how can we have resources in the community that where somebody is willing to take advantage of the resources. How do we make sure they're available and that people know about them? Because that's an issue. You actually have a fair number of resources in Vermont, and I'm not sure that those are really well publicized, like a hay bank. So people with horses can get free hay if they need it. Not well publicized. Dorset runs it. Or not well publicized in all regions. I think they do a good job on their social media, for example, but that doesn't mean that the people who need it are on that social media. And so I think there's a lot that can be done to head off a lot of those potential cruelty cases simply by making information more accessible or building up the preventative resources that are around. That's kind of rambling, but again, law professor, sorry.
My question would, you said like 400 calls, is that 400 calls or 400 animals?
That's 400 distinct calls dealing with
So they're
between
dealing with
1 and
animals a lot
30
more.
animals. A lot of them are 1 or 2 animals.
Hopefully they're not all 30 animals.
They're not all 30 animals, thankfully.
So I have a question. I don't know if it's too granular, but you were saying that you have a notable percentage of the calls where you're just making contact with that person. It doesn't require a follow-up. How often, off the cuff, do you actually get?
It's not her doing that. It's not her. She's
Oh, okay.
reporting to you what law enforcement's doing.
Oh, okay, sorry.
She's not the primary responder on
Okay. so
any
now
of these at this point.
I'm not calculating that one
Yes.
correctly. But I guess for those calls themselves, you have data on how many times there is a call back to that location?
My understanding is that they always try. Oh, you mean, so there's a call, there's
There's a
calls
call.
recorded.
Yeah.
The law enforcement calls and, checks in on it. It seems like it's okay for now.
Yeah, and then there's a call back to the same location for like a similar scenario.
Well, that would show up in a deeper dive, just
Yeah.
by address.
Yeah, and I just, it was just.
I mean, it's knowable. It's
Yeah.
something we know sitting right here.
It was just a curiosity. I didn't know if.
Yeah.
Apologies for framing that question so poorly.
Some of the big cases
Get
definitely.
back in game shape here.
It's okay. We're happy to be your crash test dummies.
Public safety. So.
Some of the higher profile cases are those sort of persistent issues where the horse case, for example, there's been 3 or 4 seizures on the property thus far. And there are other cases like that where there are chronic issues. But a lot of them seem to be one-offs, but it isn't clear if that's because the person is somewhat transient or if it's just because the animal is not seen again.
What you're asking leads to the logical, and at this time next year, we would hope to have a better handle on what's happening because we don't see everything that's happening. So we don't know. We can't tell you the answer to how many things were reported. For instance, where I live, if in the islands, if the call doesn't go to the Grand Isle County Sheriff's, but it goes directly to the first constable or there's somebody up there. It's like responsible for animal complaints, right? They don't have access to the same records management system. They are not law enforcement. And so we would not know. There's no way for us at this moment to tell you how many incidents they went out on, followed up on, or then referred to law enforcement. So there's still a lot of information out there that if we can build better connective tissue across the ecosystem of people doing this work, that we could have more solid. This is candidly a lot like domestic violence, right? You only know what gets reported, and we know that that's a really small percentage of what's actually happening in our communities. So I think that we got to start from the premise that we're never going to have our arms around the real number. We're going to have a guesstimate on the most egregious and visible incidents.
Rep. Waters Evans.
You just reminded me when you said that, part of the reason why you wanted to create this division and position in the first place is because we heard a lot of testimony a couple of years ago about how there was a connection between things like domestic violence and mental health challenges and stuff like that, and these animal cruelty or negligence cases. I'm wondering, you don't have to give us the figures right now, but did you address that at all yet in the report that's coming up, or in the connection between that, is that something you've seen?
It's not something I can see directly in
Yeah.
the data I looked at here. I do know, I'm familiar, generally it's called the link. The link between abuse of vulnerable people and abuse of animals. There's a huge connection there. Previously in my prior life and research, I looked at the connection between some abuse of animal conditions and gang activity and drug crimes. And so there's this way in which animals are either a proxy for a human victim. They are a lead up to a human victim. They're part of the whole victimization, or they're instrumentalities of these other more violent, or externally violent crimes, I guess, outside of a home. And so I don't have data on how frequently that's happening here. There's plenty of data on how frequently those things overlap generally. And part of my thought process with preventative programs, which is part of what the report talks about, is the potential for grant funding or for partnering with existing organizations better, but that it's housing instability, for example, can actually be precipitated by having pets sometimes, or the animal gets into a bad condition because the person was unstable with housing in some way. I spoke to some folks from Burlington yesterday, and I mean, they have 3 people right now who are unhoused because they have dogs. They will not go to housing despite this weather because there's no place that they can take their dogs with them. That's a fixable problem. We're not talking about needing to build a 50 animal shelter. We're talking about needing some temp kennels, perhaps partnering with a humane society where the animals can go just overnight and the owner takes them back during the day, so that we don't have the problems with degrading. We don't have the problems with cleaning and things like that if an animal's there 24/7, but where it's a partnership with these existing organizations and looking for grants that would provide the funding that's needed to make that happen.
Anyone else? I do want to be conscious of time. We should be on the floor in the next 15 minutes. So thank you so much for the time, and thank you for coming in early and hanging out with us casually.
Thank you for the coffee.
No, absolutely. Anytime. The door is always open on the Java machine. All right. We will see everybody upstairs. That's it for committee today. We have the governor's address and then floor. So that's a wrap for